So the patch 11.1 PTR has released today, and along with that, all of the tier sets for Undermine have been released, which is one of my favorite things to look at in all of World of Warcraft are the new tier sets when they come out. So we're going to go through every class's tier sets as they stand today on the 11.1 PTR, starting with plate wearers, then doing mail, leather, and cloth. So first we're starting off with the warrior here, and these are my first impressions. I haven't seen any of these sets as we just go through it, and I'm liking the design of the set, but that's not my favorite color on the normal set here. Raid Finder I actually prefer to normal. I think that's pretty strong, that white and orange kind of fire look. Heroic is pretty sick. I do like the dark gray with blue. And finally we have the mythic set with the additional particle effects here. And of course, black and red. If you guys have watched any of my other videos, this is going to be top tier for me. So I'm super happy as a warrior seeing this for the first time. As for the PvP sets for Gladiator, this one's decent. And for the Elite, okay, that's pretty sick as well, but still Mythic PvE is my favorite set there. After that, let's move on to Paladin and see what we have. Oh, that's pretty awesome. I do like how they're staying with the traditional Paladin theme that we've seen from both the Arathi and the Alliance. Obviously, the Lion shoulder pads are pretty great. Happy with the normal set so far. Raid Finder is weaker than normal in my opinion. Heroic I think is actually weaker than both of those just from what I'm seeing. I'd rather have the normal or the Raid Finder over the Heroic. This looks more like something from Bastion than anything else. And the Mythic set looks maybe a little too similar to the Heroic set in my opinion. I'm not seeing where the extra particle effects are coming into play. Maybe some more coming from the mouth and from the back of the head there. Overall though, I'm digging the normal set probably is the best for the Paladin, but I do like the dark gray look. For PvP, the Gladiator one is a nice green. I don't have anything super interesting to say about that. And the Elite one, I feel like we keep seeing this white and purple combination with PvP sets just throughout both Dragonflight and now the War Within. For the final plate set, we have Death Knight. And this is looking kind of like a Shadowlands set, but it looks very Death Knight-esque. And I guess I'll pause to say here that I've been really pleased so far with just these first three that I've seen, that a lot of these sets actually match the class fantasy instead of looking very samey, so that's pretty nice. I don't know how I feel about Raid Finder compared to normal. I do like the green. It looks more like an unholy Death Knight rather than a Blood Death Knight here. Is Heroic going to be a Frost Death Knight? And I called it. This one is pretty sick. Loving the Heroic, and the cape is just amazing with that particle effect. So I'm loving the Heroic set for the Death Knight so far. And Mythic takes the cake. Wonderful particle effects on the shoulders and the horns of the helmet, and that is the coolest cloak that's ever been in the game so far, in my opinion. Moving on to mail, let's start with Hunters. This looks like a Dragonflight questing set, so pretty unhappy with just looking at what the set looks like. The colors are alright. Raid Finder looks alright. Heroic looks alright. Hunters really, in my opinion, not really making out very well with the set this season. However, the Mythic one is pretty sick. That feels very Dark Ranger-esque, so if you're a Sylvanas stan but didn't want to use the actual Dark Ranger set, this is going to be awesome as a supplemental here. I forgot to go through the Death Knight PvP set, so let me just do that real quickly. Gladiator looks similar to the Heroic PvE set in terms of being a Frost Death Knight. And the Elite set is actually, in my opinion, pretty weak. This like bronze, brass type metal is never my favorite. Purple is alright for a Death Knight. So let's return and do the Hunter PvP. Gladiator looks super weak. Least favorite out of all four of the other sets we've seen so far from Hunter. Elite feels very, very Hunter in terms of the color. I mean, is this not the actual class color that you see on the raid frames? So in a sense, I like it for that reason. Just still overall not a huge fan of the set in general. Let's go on to Shaman as our next male set. And whoa, for my first impressions here is this is a pretty crazy looking set in terms of the way in which this cloth is draped over the chest piece here. The colors are all right. Looks like we got fire. I wonder if we're going to go through the elements here as we go through it. Lightning, right, for the Raid Finder, which is pretty sick. Heroic looks like it's going to be a different kind of lightning, maybe more like frost, right? I can see that there's some arcing between the belt, but that's going to be for every difficulty. And then here's the real arcing, right? This looks like kind of the storm rooks that we've seen throughout the War Within, their kind of color scheme, especially with this lightning. So especially if you're an elemental shaman, you're probably really enjoying this set. Probably one of the best shaman sets we've had in the last couple of seasons and even last couple expansions, in my opinion. As for the shaman PvP sets, Gladiator, the green, it feels a little weak for me, and the Elite set is cool. I mean, It doesn't really feel like class fantasy in terms of Shaman. Like in terms of all the sets we've seen so far, Shaman doesn't feel like it's a Shaman type, like Shaman specific set. If you told me this was something else like an Evoker or even a Hunter set, I might believe you. Speaking of Evoker, let's move on to them as the next male class here. And we're obviously viewing this on an orc, so take that with a grain of salt in terms of some of the different scales. Like the scale of the helmet to what it would look like on an actual Drakthir. Same with the shoulder pads in particular. It's looking very Evoker. It looks like it's a questing set out of Dragonflight. Same with the Raid Finder set. This looks like bronze Dragonflight. Normal looked like red Dragonflight. I wonder if we're going to get green and blue as the next one. Looks like a blue Dragonflight set on the heroic side. And then, of course, for Mythic, this just looks like the most stereotypical Evoker thing I've ever seen. However, the shoulder pad effect is pretty sweet. As for PvP, the Gladiator set looks like the green Dragonflight set. Once again, these look like Dragonflight questing sets to me, so I'm not super impressed. The Elite set is also weak to me. I just never enjoyed Evoker sets too much, it seems. Alright, so we finished up with all of the male classes. We're going to head on to Leather now, which we have a few Leather classes here to go through. So we're going to start off with Rogue. Rogues are always usually pretty strong, and as I say that, I'm not the biggest fan. The skull helmet is interesting, so it looks like it transforms your whole head into a skull. But if you really like pirate stuff, you're in luck. I actually like the Raid Finder one better just because of the different colors on the skull, how it's a little bit darker than the normal set. Heroic with a golden skull is pretty sweet too, but Raid Finder happens to be my favorite set for Rogue so far, until we see Mythic, of course, which combines my favorite black and red combination. It looks great on any armor set with a golden skull. I gotta say that's pretty sweet, but once again, if you are not a fan of pirate motif, you're out of luck. For the Gladiator set, pretty strong from a PvP standpoint. And the Elite set, wow, this is cool. This caught me a little bit by surprise, just the difference in the color scheme, especially for a Rogue. It doesn't look like normal Rogue colors. And the particle effects on these feather knife blades on the shoulder pads are pretty awesome. All right, so let's move on to another leather set with Monk. Wow. Returning back to the class fantasy idea, I mean, wow, the like Chinese dragon head. Oh, wow, and I'm moving around the camera and both the shoulder pad strap and the hair of the helmet are actually moving. So you can see that. I'm actually very happy with the Monk set so far, and that's an awesome color scheme just for normal. Also another awesome color scheme for Raid Finder. I mean, geez, Monk is taking it away this season, it seems. Heroic seems weaker so far to me. This might be my least favorite of what we've seen so far from the Monk. Until I saw Mythic. Mythic, it's so stereotypical Monk, especially with the tier 2 kind of attempt that they made with the anniversary. This looks really close to that, just in terms of the color scheme and the particle effect, so it doesn't seem like anything new. The normal one is taking the cake for me just because of the colors. For PvP, the Gladiator set, it looks alright. It looks pretty similar to the Raid Finder PvE set. And the Elite one, I do like that it feels like it's like a dark shadow Monk with the purple. So I'm actually happy with the Elite PvP set on that one. Let's move on to Druid here. And wow, this looks like the Dragonflight set from Amir Drasil, if I'm not mistaken. Just seen as a first glance. Mixed with the Tier 2 set from Classic. I'm enjoying it. The color scheme is not my favorite on normal though. Raid Finder is even less of a favorite color scheme for me. This looks like Drustvar type stuff, so I'm getting a little bit of Shadowlands mixed with Battle for Azeroth vibes in terms of the way in which this is laid out for Druids. Kind of like the Koltiran Druid motif, right? So if you're Koltiran Druid, this probably goes well with what you enjoy. The Heroic one, I'm digging the colors on that the most so far. Yeah, even more so than the Mythic. This green looks a little bit out of place, and so does this brown. I think doesn't go with the rest of the color palette we're having on Mythic here, but the particle effects from the wolf skulls are indeed pretty cool. The yellow of the Gladiator set, I never like yellow in sets, so not a fan. And the purple of the Elite set is pretty sick in my opinion. Alright, let's move on to Demon Hunters. Wow, okay, this looks a little bit like Antorus in terms of the set, rather than, I feel like all the Demon Hunter sets we've had so far have just looked like another remake of the Demon Hunter starting set or some sort of leveling set. This one, though, does look pretty unique. It looks like something from Antorus. Maybe that has something to do with the lore. Who knows? As we move through it, obviously, it hasn't come out yet. Raid Finder one looks interesting. Not my favorite. I definitely prefer the normal over this kind of like brownish gold motif we have going on here. Heroic is interesting for a Demon Hunter because this looks more like a Frost Death Knight set. If I saw this and you told me this was a Frost Death Knight set, I would say, oh yeah, cool, that's actually a pretty awesome Frost Death Knight set. For it being a Demon Hunter set is pretty unique. I do enjoy it, but I don't think it fits the class fantasy very well just in terms of the color scheme. And the Mythic set is pretty badass. I mean, if you look at the kind of horn coming out of the top of this demon skull on the shoulder and that cracked kind of molten effect, this is a cool set. I'm really happy with this. The Gladiator set feels lackluster, and the color palette feels weird and kind of maybe even randomized to me. Like they threw a bunch of colors into a randomizer and said, give me a color palette. And the Elite set, it's pretty awesome, just like the Mythic set. I just think the particle effects on these horns on the shoulder are something we haven't seen too much of, and I think it's just great, honestly. So that cuts it for the leather wearing classes. Let's move on to the cloth, starting with Priest. So Priest is starting off feeling very Arathi to me, just in the design so far, and I really don't like this kind of like dusty salmon color, so not a fan of the normal PvE set. The PvE Raid Finder set actually I think looks cooler and fits the Priest theme more with the white and the glowing, so I'm happy with that. The Heroic set feels a little weird. This feels like a Frost Mage set when I see this for the first time, but for those that like it, there you go. And the Mythic set being this dark gray is actually pretty sweet. It's kind of like a dark Shadow Priest, especially if you were a Shadow Priest that actually had the Shadow form on. This set might actually look really sick. For the PvP sets, the Gladiator one feels a little weird with the high contrast, but I actually kind of like the high contrast compared to some of the other sets we've seen from the PvE Priest sets. You know, this kind of like dark blue with bright white is a pretty neat combo. And remember what I said earlier in the video, this white and purple PvE Elite set seems to be a repetitive theme that we've seen throughout the past few expansions. Or I mentioned that it looked like a Frost Mage earlier, so let's go on to Mage as our next cloth-wielding class. So here is our Mage normal set, which immediately looks like a Firebird set, but it also kind of looks like a Vault of the Incarnate set in terms of the fact that it's very stone-like. Raid Finder, these look like the three Pokemon, like Articuno, Zapdos. So what is Heroic going to be Zapdos? No, this is more Articuno. This is actually a pretty neat set if you're a Frost Mage. I wonder if Mythic's going to be an Arcane Mage looking set. Absolutely not. It is a black and red set with some awesome shoulder pad effects, in my opinion. So this one looks pretty sick. It actually looks like a Cataclysm set or a Vault of the Incarnate set. It's like, what's that one dungeon from the Cataclysm where there's all the stone dragons? This looks right out of that dungeon. For PvP sets, that is the most horrid green weird set ever for the PvP Gladiator set on Mage. I'm not a fan of it. Maybe one of the least favorite sets so far in the entire video that we've gone through. And for the Elite, once again we have this white and purple motif. There's some black in here. So this looks like an Arcane Mage set. Like if Khadgar evolved and leveled up, this is what he might be wearing, so I'm pretty happy with this Elite PvP set for the Mage. So the final class that we have to go through is the Warlock to end off the video as the last cloth wielder. Immediately, this reminds me of Tier 3 Naxxramas vanilla set, just immediately. I'm loving the class fantasy here. It almost looks like he's wearing a Slipknot mask, just the way in which that's stitched together. And we got the Fell Hunter looking shoulder pads. So awesome, and of course the green, the Fell green, it works for a normal set. That's pretty great. Raid Finder, it's interesting. Feels a little bit more Burning Blade cultist. So if you're going for that vibe as a Warlock, this works out for you. I also want to call out the different asymmetrical horns on the helmet, which I think are an awesome touch. The Heroic set feels a little weird for me. It feels a little bit Void more than it does Warlock, and Void reminds me of the Priest class, obviously because Xalatath used to be a Priest weapon, and there's the Shadow Priest. So this feels like a weird color for the Warlock, but I don't dislike it. And Mythic, it's got to take the cake once again. This looks like something out of the Plaguelands, in my opinion, but the black and red set with just this awesome visual on the shoulder pads. You can never go wrong with Warlock sets. It always feels like they kill it with Warlock sets almost every season, every expansion, every time. As for the PvP sets for the Warlock, to end out the video here, we have the Gladiator set, which is a strange green. It still could work from the Fell perspective, but it's a little bit more bluish and teal and cool rather than warm, as we saw with the other green on the normal set. And the Elite set is a wonderful purple. This is a super Warlock purple. It doesn't feel like a Void purple. This feels like Dread Mist almost. A Dread Mist set from Vanilla WoW, just redone as if they were going to do it today. So I'm pretty happy with the Warlock set overall. So those are all of the classes PvE and PvP tier sets as they are on the PTR today. Now things are subject to change, but this is actually the first time that I've seen every single set, both for PvE and PvP, be working and not have some broken textures in it. So these are probably going to be what we're going to see in the game when the Undermine patch releases pretty shortly. So feel free to let me know what set of yours was your favorite. I'm always going to be partial to the plate sets, but I think in particular what I'm a fan of this time around is the Death Knight Mythic. It feels like Shadowland redo with one of the coolest capes of all time. This set is S tier for me. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.